Who's videoing. This is Avery, and this is Torin. So we can do this many different ways, but what we decided to do is we're each going to just talk for a couple of minutes to you guys about what we thought was important. And we didn't plan or script any of this. It's just our own individual thoughts. I hope nobody minds if I put my foot on this. So I'm just going to head right into it. And I know you guys studied the Occupy movement last week, or is that what Ben said? So you did some. Okay, so what you've got here, I mean, we're for revolutionaries and we're radicals. And when I say radicals, what a radical does, radicalism is very demonized just by society. Everybody wants to conform and everybody just wants to go shopping and not have a radical come up and talk to them. But all we really are is, if we identify a problem, whether it's personal or in society or wherever else, a radical just looks for the root causes of the problem. And that's all it is. And we go to the root causes to try to fix problems instead of putting Band-Aids on symptoms, which isn't very effective, but that's how a system maintains its continuity. They never address, like, if you have a systemic problem, say you have a plant and it has a fungus inside of it, and you just keep painting that plant green, that would not be a radical solution. You want to get into that soil and you want to figure out what pathogen is making your plant sick, okay? So, and radicalism, radical, does come from the same root word as roots, as radishes and all that. So we look for root causes. So I just want to talk real quickly about a litmus test too. When you listen to me today, number one, I don't have anything to gain from any of you people. I'm not here to profit off of you in any way. I mean, there's no reason to be here except just to talk to you. And also, can I prove what I say? If I utter a statement, I'm not just telling you some bullshit. I can prove what I'm saying, okay? So anybody can challenge anything that I say. So real quickly, we're all angry, and your parents are, and you guys might feel some of that anxiety, because all across the spectrum we live in, we're feeling like injustices being like perpetrated against us from all different. If you're Tea Party, that's kind of right wing, and we're actually way left or somewhere on a more socially aware kind of spectrum. But we feel like we're being marginalized and not being represented by our government. So that injustices that we're feeling. The medicine for injustice is maximizing justice for all of us. It's about fairness and equality. And so, we're not like fire-breathing crazy people. We just want you people to be treated fairly when you get out of this high school. We live in a system of absolute corporate domination with all aspects of our lives are mined to extract maximum profit for private hordes. So like big corporations are mining your communities. They're sucking all the wealth out of you that they can for their narrow short-term interest. So you might look at a pretty ad on TV, but never forget, those big companies all they really care about, they're not alive. And the people in them don't matter because they're all replaceable. But the company's role in society is to suck wealth out of you and your community. They don't admit that, but it's basic economics. So both of the major political parties that we have are corporatists, meaning that their constituents are not you. Their constituents are corporations that are paying for these expensive political campaigns. So about 1% to 2% of the world's population has all of the wealth and power. And the way they maintain this is challenging to maintain it. So they use many strategies simultaneously, and what it's called technically is a domination and control system. And then they use repression apparatus to keep you down, okay? So they put a lot of lipstick on the pig, but they distract you, they divide and conquer us, they pit people against each other. The lower on the economic spectrum you are, the more you're pitted against each other. Even you students are pitted against other high schools in like football and stuff. I mean, who freaking cares? But you guys will go out there and fight each other after a football game because somebody scored another point. And that it's fun. When I was your age, I did the same thing, but it's insane. Okay? It doesn't make any sense. But that's part of the way we're being indoctrinated to be pitted against each other, okay? So they elevate royalism and blind obedience to power. They trick us to distrust science and rationalism. They disseminate myth and superstition. They load society with drugs and alcohol, simmer anti-intellectualism amongst like all classes. If you're the smart kid every now and again, when I was a kid, I got dragged out on the playground and the living, you know what, beat out of me because I was different. And I stood there and I said, hang on a second, that doesn't make any sense. Well, whatever the anti-intellectualism drivers are, I got my ass beat like a lot. So don't worry about that if that happens to you. I mean, you should worry, but stand up for yourself. Okay, and it's mostly perpetrated against workers. And you never let people know they can organize on their own to affect change. That's like the biggest danger to society, that nobody wants you to organize to get a better school here or a better town. So just be very skeptical. So that we're taught to worship greed and maximize our own gain at someone else's expense regardless of the cost. The media, the corporate media, is basically a blind thought control mechanism. That is, they don't, like New York Times, Burlington Free Press, Channel 3, CBS, NBC, what those corporations are institutions that sell ads to other corporations for millions of dollars. So the product is not news or anything. The product is advertising space, okay? And the shows, even the news, is designed to soften you up for the commercials, okay? And this is scientific. They spend billions of dollars trying to figure out how to get more out of your pocket. So ignorance breeds indifference. What we know we care about and what we fail to recognize we don't give a crap about. So it's all about educational issues, just what you're doing here today. Don't be ignorant. And what I mean is study. Since I graduated college, I've probably done 3 master's degrees and a couple PhDs worth of work educating myself at public libraries and using alternative media. And I did it for myself. I don't have to pay a university $100,000 to go get smart, okay? Don't get into that trap. So the main thing you guys need to learn today is about, for me, this is just me, is an intellectual self-defense mechanism, okay? Just like martial arts or just like any kind of self-defense, your brain needs to be defended. So most importantly, you need to learn as individuals about what a propaganda model is, and what does anyone have to gain from me supporting their idea. So if somebody lays a rap on you, are they going to profit from you if you fall into what they're talking about? If you feel like they're going to profit personally from that, you accepting that idea, be very skeptical. An alternative media that's responsible doesn't have ads in it. Like corporate media, if they ran a header over the New York Times that said, "We can't print anything our sponsors won't allow," that would be a true statement. They will never put a story in there that challenges power or that challenges their advertisers. They can't. It's systemic. They'll lose their advertiser and they'll go out of business. So who benefits, who pays? Is this institution or anti-democratic? If I acquiesce to this idea, is it empowering to myself and my economic class? And whatever you do, there's a gentleman named Noam Chomsky, who's probably one of the most brilliant Americans that's in the second half of this century and the beginning of this, of the 20th and 21st. He's an amazing man, and he's written 100 books. But read Manufacturing Consent. It describes what a propaganda model is. It's very easy to read, and it's Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent. And what he talks about is how our leadership puts out a bunch of agendas, and all we're allowed to do is rubber stamp them. Nobody ever asks you guys or your parents what should be on those agendas. So they put something crazy right-wing nonsense out there that's selling us completely down the river, and all we get to do is go, okay, we want craziness light or we want craziness fully to the max, like Fox News and stuff like that. Don't watch that stuff. It's the most right-wing naked propaganda you're ever going to be exposed to. Or if you do watch it, be skeptical. So there's a lot to do, and I'm going to let these guys talk, so I won't run on too much longer. But we're like the other 1% is what we are. There's the 1% that dominates and controls, but they're the people who always resist oppression throughout history. Are the 1% that's always in every society. Roman culture, Jesus and his band, If you look at the Roman arrest records in Italy right now, he was a terrorist. He was no savior. He was nothing. They were sword-carrying terrorist band of 12 people that attacked Roman legions. They were charged with sedition and illegal assembly and disseminating. You're not allowed to talk to poor people and give them any heads up in that society. They will kill you. So they were, everything is very quasi. So, just don't fall into intellectual traps. So we have an obligation and a duty to end institutionalized corruption. These guys are going to tie it better to the present day. But we are like bagged and tagged, all of us, and we're getting dragged to the edge of a cliff, and they're going to sling us off by shipping all of our jobs to China. All valuable manufacturing is gone. We're just shopping for plastic crap at Walmart, and we're not even making it. And those companies are basically sucking us dry. And the Wall Street, Goldman Sachs and whatever are the engineers of the financial collapse we just had. All the regulatory structure from the Great Depression, the New Deal, all of it's gone. So we're in this boom and bust cycle of capitalism like we were in the 1890s. And it's not an accident. That's the way billionaires make money. So they profit on going up, and they profit when we crash. And the only one that really suffers every time it crashes, working people get lower and lower and lower. So we got to dig our heels in, and that's what we're doing right now. We're not going to solve problems today, but we got to dig our heels in and stop this nightmare so we can all have an honest conversation with our leaders who are totally sold out. But they will change. If enough people get in there and say, you got to stop, this is over, game over, then we can all have a conversation about the way we want things to head. So I'm done, and I really appreciate your time, and we're going to open this up for questions afterwards. So I'm just going to, one more thing about the anti-slavery movement, child labor movement, getting children who are your age chained in factories in Massachusetts in the 1800s. That was a very real thing. The labor struggles, women's suffrage, civil rights, the anti-war and peace movements, the environmental movement, all successful, and all started with people in the streets. And those are the major accomplishments of America for working people in the last 150 years. Not one of those did the government do for you. It was your parents, your grandparents, and your great-grandparents in the streets demanding change. And that is the only way for working people to get anything done. Don't pretend that politicians are ever going to do anything for you, because they're all corporatists. They take money from rich people and they serve the rich. So and that's it. So thank you guys.
Brad, I think you said it really well. The way things work in capitalism, or really in any society, anytime any product is brought to market and sold, it involves three, what's known in economics as factors of production: land, labor, and capital. And you need those three things to make any product. You need a space in reality for it to occur. You need a person to bring the pen to the paper, or the board to the saw, or whatever it is you're doing. And you need a machine, or there's also what's known as human capital, which is knowledge within your own mind. And the way the system works today is you got the ruling class, the 1%. They own all the land and all the capital, all the plants and equipment, all the machinery, all the real resources that we need to produce goods. And all of us go out to the job market to sell our labor. So the 99% provides the labor, and the 1% owns the land and the capital in capitalism today. And Adam Smith once said, "It's the desire of every man to live a life without shame." What he meant by that was that people are going to go out in society, and they're going to buy things and acquire skills and knowledge that is going to bring them on their dying day to a place where they can look back and say, "This is what I've done for myself." In Adam Smith's day, that meant a clean linen shirt. Today, you still need the shirt. You need a Mercedes, you need 2 vacations a year in the sun, you need an iPad, you need a computer, you need a 2-car garage. So there's a lot of things in life that the media is pushing on you to consume. And we've gotten to a point where in society we have reached a point of production where it's no longer about growing, it's about encroaching on our rights and about selling us things we don't need with money we don't have to create impressions that won't last on people we don't care about. And that's what's really going on in society today. And the 1% has set up a system where they can extract that from us. And we are defenseless against it because of the ways in which corporations and politicians have have erected barriers that we can't get any answers from them. So the Occupy movement, though there may be radicals in it, is really just common sense. It's about creating a space in society where this dialogue can occur, because it's not going to get done in Congress, and it's not going to get done by the corporations. There's no such thing as democracy in corporations. The way decisions are made in corporations is through shareholder votes. They come together every quarter or every year or twice a year, and they have conferences among their shareholders, and they hold votes. Problem with that is you get one vote per share, and so the richest shareholders in the company own most of the shares, and the people, average citizens, though they may own stock, it's often through a mutual fund or through another type of vehicle, and those voting rights are often proxied to the fund manager, meaning those collection of shares that individuals hold are actually not even controlled by them. So decisions made in a corporate level are by and large non-democratic. And so in the Occupy movement, we're aiming to create a democratic space for society to come to terms with some of the issues that it faces today. Brad touched on the college education. I think you all should go to college. I think you should all grow and learn and influence your minds. I don't think you should go to college for $250,000 or what it's out there costing people these days. We've gone to a point in society where we don't give college an honest cost-benefit analysis. We go because we're told to go. We go because it's a vindication of what we've achieved in high school. We go because everyone in the top half of our class is going. So you really need to question what it is the media and politicians are telling you, and college is just one of the ways in which that's happening. Like Brad said about organizing, bosses need workers more than workers need bosses. Without the labor, the land and capital just sit there and they don't make money. Okay, so the Occupy movement is about getting working class citizens to realize that they really hold the power. They are the means by which this profit in society is channeled upward to the 1%. And without the assistance of the rest of society, the 99%, the rich don't have anything. The money flows up through the consent, the subconscious consent of the working class. And so by going to work every day or by going out and pay, every time you buy something, you're voting with your money. And also every time you go to work, you're endorsing the agenda of the company that you work for. And that's fine, and there's a lot of good causes to go out there and advocate, and there's a lot of good companies to work for, there's a lot of good products to buy. There's also a lot of bad products to buy. And there's also value in coming together as a working class, unionizing, making decisions, and influencing society in those ways. And so I think, again, the Occupy movement is about creating an awareness among people that can change. That's really all I have to say. If Avery, you want to take it from there.
Yeah, sure. I guess, I don't know, what kind of stuff do you guys care about? Just shout it out.
Football.
Football?
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
Theater.
Theater?
Women.
Cool. Women?
Yeah.
Okay.
Medicine.
Madison?
Medicine.
Medicine. Okay, cool, yeah. So everyone here, cares about things. I think the Occupy movement, its strength is about bringing together, it's been criticized in the media, but it's about bringing together people who care about a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. And I think the media has really criticized it for not having a synthesized set of demands or a set of issues that it's addressing altogether. But I think that's one of its strengths, what you both were saying. There's a lot of things that we can identify and sit down and say, hey, this is kind of messed up, maybe we should change it. I don't know, I don't really follow football, but sports in general, I'm trying to make this connection, I don't know if I can.
Go for it.
I don't know, I guess we just, to compare it to sports, I guess it's kind of like the athletes coming together and saying hey, we're the ones that make this game happen. Our coaches can tell us how to do the game and they can make us better at the game, but honestly, when it comes down to it, the athletes are the ones who play the game and make the game happen. And the Occupy movement is basically if you can compare the working class and the athletes together, it's basically the working class coming together and saying, you know what, we're making this game happen and it's not benefiting us at all. We're not having fun anymore. This is getting ridiculous. I'm getting punched in the face every single time I try to make it down, and I want this to stop. We need to sit down and think about the rules of the game and change this game so that it's better for us who are playing it, and then it's more fun to watch. for everyone else too, I think. And that's like, I think.
They're also all organized. All professional athletes are in unions, so they don't get taken advantage of by the owners of their league and of their teams. And they're in unions on purpose because it benefits them.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, for me, I just remember feeling really frustrated about, like, all of these issues that are going on, like climate change, maybe, like, working class, like, my dad's been laid off 3 or 4 times, like, that's really frustrating to deal with, like, pretty scary, too, all these things I feel really frustrated about, and this is the first time in my life that I've been involved in something that's making me feel like we have the power to change it. Just like being with a group of 50 people at a time and sitting down and talking about these issues and walking through them with a bunch of people has been really reaffirming, just to sit down and say, like, hey, we're all having the same thoughts, we're all having the same experiences, because the United States has for so long organized and, like, sort of sold this idea of the fact that we're all individuals and we all have our own individual experiences, and there's no trends you can draw from those individual experiences. Like, I can sit here and, like, talk about my own life, and then when you get with a group of people, you realize that some of those trends are actually systematic. So the system is built to create these things and, like, perpetuate what's going on over and over and over again. Like, my dad is not the only person who's been laid off, clearly. There's been plenty of unemployment is skyrocketing right now. And I'm honestly worried about getting a job after college. Like, I'm a lifeguard. I'm probably gonna be a lifeguard for the next 5 or 6 years because of the job market. I don't know. Like, that's not what I went to college to do. But, like, getting together and talking, like what you were saying, just like the working class coming together and sitting down and saying, like, we make this system happen and we can change this system. It's really about looking at it and recognizing that, like, we're powerful. And what Brad was saying, in terms of our history, we're taught history as if it's famous people, individual people who have, like, been attached to these accomplishments, like the civil rights movement or women's suffrage or the abolition of slavery. But in reality, it's groups of people who get together and have these conversations and start mobilizing themselves and getting into the streets and sitting down with people and having meetings and really addressing these issues together. And the way that we're taught history doesn't necessarily look at that. Although, in addition to Noam Chomsky, I would say Howard Zinn is a really cool dude to read. He has a book called The History of American Empire, and it's a comic book. It's super cool. It's not like a tome of history. It's, like, really awesome comics. And I've been reading that, and it makes me really excited about history. It's so good. And then, I don't know, Bell Hooks is a really awesome, not to just sit here and be like, you guys should all read this, but Bell Hooks is a really badass woman. She's awesome. She talks about how to be better lovers. Your woman she writes a book about men and how they should love women and how they should love everyone, and, like, just really awesome books. Bell Hooks is so cool, and she talks about how we should just get rid of these ideas of dominating each other and, like, really be together and as equals on the same playing field. And I don't know, Bell Hooks and Howard Zinn, check them out.
Ton, would you cover me? Sure. Class? To me, the Occupy movement represents a lot of things. We as Americans in our country, under our Constitution, have a grave responsibility to the downwind effects of what we do. Myself, I have visited places that have been heavily oppressed by the 1% in order to extract resources or power from that area. And I've seen what it looks like when a tank shell hits a classroom like this and takes half the people out over something as simple as resources such as land or something that's wanted from those people that live there. They're trying to live a good life. If it wasn't for a system of oppression and extreme capitalism that wishes to extract maximum resources regardless of the price, then these things wouldn't happen. So I see, as Americans, we have a responsibility for this. Anytime that our taxpayer dollars are spent or used in violation of our own laws and in violation of international law, I think we have cause to be concerned. In one more letter to the editor or another letter to a congressman or voting in between two individuals that represent basically the same corporate pro-war policy isn't necessarily a solution, and certainly isn't a solution for those people that are sitting in the classroom looking at half their classmates gone. So to me, I see that there comes a time where as Americans, we actually have to stand up and this is something that the Occupy movement has done. In the beginning, they say, oh, what are the demands? What is this about? Well, this is about, like as a lot of you have said, opening a place to where we can have a conversation and come together into a public forum with a variety of issues, be they economic, be they anti-war, be they pro-rights on many different fronts. We can come together and we can have a conversation in a way that's democratic, where every voice gets respected, regardless of what their perspective is. And we can make decisions as a group as to how we're going to go forward to address those issues. So us, in our movement in Vermont, we have had encampments to where we invite people to join the conversation and create and open a public space where anybody with any concern, criticism, or support is welcome to join us in an open space to be able to communicate what their concerns are, their questions about our concerns. And in most cases, our harshest critics, in my experience at our encampment, have walked away supporters. When we've talked about as there is many issues that tie together the Occupy movement, there's also certain core principles that have brought a lot of us together that would be common points that we could all agree on, although we wouldn't agree on everything. There's a few things we can agree on. For one is corporate power and corporate money in our politics have stolen our democracy from us. And recent Supreme Court decisions that say such things as corporations are people and money is speech are directly made in order to take the power away from the people and put it more on this corporate type structure where those that have the most shares in the corporations are the ones that get to make the decisions. And it puts us in a supposed democracy feeling like, well, all I have to do is every 4 years is vote for the least worst idiot on the Republican or Democratic side that will hopefully do the least amount of harm and the most amount of good. So when you're given the worst, when these are the sort of decisions that we're given to choose between two parties that are both pro-war and pro-corporate, that's like giving us a choice between Coke and Pepsi. Not saying that there's fresh water, there's juice, there's tea, there's many varieties of things to drink, but we're enforced with these two corporate models, and we choose one over the other and then believe that somehow that's supposed to make a difference one way or another. So what our movement is doing is bringing people together to find ways to challenge this system that perpetuates violence, perpetuates the mining of our communities, of all of their resources, the mining of all the labor. And at the same time, like a lot of people have problems with unions and organizing, well, these are the things that brought us the 40-hour week. These are things that brought us basic weekends, things that we basically accept as rights as Americans, have only come about in this country because people have organized, sat down together, and then figured out a way to overcome common obstacles. So that's what we invite everybody to do in their own communities, whether, regardless of what their issues are, come together, discuss these issues, find ways that you can benefit your own communities, find ways that you can somehow hopefully find politicians that aren't completely sold out already and represent your own interests. And me, my particular role in this movement has been largely to document this movement. With that little camera, word of what we've done and actions that we've engaged in have been spread all around the world. We can also be our own media. With the cell phone I can send out a Twitter around the world. I can send an image of something that's happening in real time all around the world. I can race to a computer and upload and able to communicate all in things which are free and readily available, able to communicate all around the world our message, and hopefully inviting people in to be able to join that conversation with us. So that's something, regardless of your political position, that's one thing that everybody that cares to should take full advantage of, is their ability to communicate on a global scale beyond your voice. So we have our voices and also every other resource at our disposal to be able to try to draw into the conversation the basic responsibilities that every American has to see that their governments do not run amok by giving our corporations carte blanche to do as they please with us. Because if we continue on this path, we decline even worse than we are now. So please join the conversation, and any questions that you have, we're more than happy to answer.
I'm going to say one thing. Tyler is what he does, and he's very humble about it, but he films conflict in Palestine between Israelis and Palestinians. He's really what he describes people and buildings and schools being blown up. He has many videos that have been used in court cases regarding war crimes, et cetera, et cetera. So he is not somebody who's just talking on some kind of theoretical. He's in the trenches with those people struggling against being annihilated every day. It's another very interesting case study if you look into the treatment of Palestinians and how the country was taken from them, and it's a very crazy event that's happening now, and it's been going on for 100 years. And because they don't have any oil, and they're not an official ally of ours, they're portrayed as subhuman, basically almost like animals, where everyone. So he really knows where he's coming from when he says that. And his videos are available. We'll give you our websites and stuff when we're done.
When does this period end?
And at 10:51.
Okay.
Great, cool.
Is there any questions that, on any level, that any of you may have regarding anything?
What would, do you want to change in government? I mean, you want to change the system, so what would the system look like in your view of a good system? Would everyone have a vote? Like, would it be a full democracy, or would we come together in certain groups, or
Okay.
how would we be
So,
represented?
and just for Brad Hartley, an idea would be to use the United States Constitution. We have a wonderful framework, probably, and that's why it's used as a model around the world, because it's a good framework to build from. Is it perfect? It's absolutely not. It was originally designed to protect a bunch of colonial elites from the royal power of the king. So even in the Constitution, when they say people and when they're talking about who has the rights, it didn't include any of us. You had to own property. You had to be rich to be included in the original Constitution. But they did put in language about all people being created equal, et cetera, et cetera. And then the amendments to the Constitution actually empower us. So what I would say would be, first of all, the most important thing in my mind is to get corporate money out of politics. You cannot have $200, $300 million campaigns, because what that does is limit. There's no way. If I want to go run my mouth even at any level without a publicly financed campaign cycle, which should only be about a month or two like they do in Europe. It should not be 2 years of just blah, 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 which is just designed to turn you off. So first of all, we would get corporate money out of politics completely. It would be illegal. And we would have publicly financed campaigns, and parties could fuse together. It wouldn't be us, them, this, that. You would have more parties pop up, and they could be fused, and they could, garner votes that way. Then the ability to address grievances in our government and the Constitution is now what we call lobbying, and we would have to have a serious conversation about how institutions with almost unlimited wealth, how much access and how much influence they're allowed to. Basically, it's legalized bribery. They're promising the world, if these politicians who are scared because they won't get elected again, they're afraid to say no, so they allow all these, basically, I call them like corporate whores, basically. And they allow them into the system at unbelievable levels. I mean, and almost every retired powerful congressperson becomes a lobbyist. And they go back and lobby for the institutions that they were regulating. So they're giving them all the insider info. So if our representatives are forced through public financing to represent our interests a little bit more, you see how the framework would start to click. It could be it's called the concept of a meaningful democracy, not a fake propaganda democracy. So the way you judge a meaningful democracy is you have what's called an agenda. And that's what Congress does every year. They form agendas. And you should never be affected by an agenda, only in equal proportion to the fact that you've had the ability to contribute to the agenda. If nobody's asking you or your parents or your grandparents what we should talk about and with the people's money in Congress, then it's completely fake. So all we're allowed to do is rubber stamp a couple of corporatist agendas by voting. So that's how rigged they have the system, but the framework is completely there to have a meaningful democracy. Say the President of the United States was more of it would take his personal or her personal integrity. But to say if they self-decided and empowered themselves to represent more people's interests rather than just the people, once you get elected, the most powerful people in the world start whispering in the president's ear every day. And one reason why Obama ran so hard on change, but then when he gets in office, it's just like Bush light. I mean, it's a pure continuation of the Bush administration. Actually, we're killing more people, we're invading more people, we have 900 foreign bases in 165 countries right now. That is total world domination, that's imperialism. And the reason he can't stop that is because these, actually trillionaire people are in his ear telling him, this is the way, you can talk all that crap when you're in an election cycle, but when you get in here, you are my little you-know-what. And you are going to do what we say, how we say, when we say. And so he doesn't look out the window and see 5,000 people going, tell him what it is, Obama, stand up for yourself. He looks out the White House window and there's nobody out there but cops. See, there's nobody's backing him. Nobody's watching his back. So even though he may have high personal integrity, he's just running scared. And you're going to get the massive right-wing agenda that the owners of society want. So those structural issues would have to be challenged, but meaningful democracy where you can input the agenda, and you're only affected by those agendas in equal proportion to what you put into it. That's pure libertarianism. Any illegitimate layers of authority over you are not self-justifying. Just because somebody says you can't do this and all these laws control your behavior. If nobody ever asked you, well, what the hell are you doing that to me for? There's no such thing as self-legitimizing authority, and that's what libertarianism is. So I'm a socialist libertarian. So I believe that everybody should pay, everybody should benefit, and illegitimate authority is not going to be tolerated. Would I ever vote to support pedophilia or murder? Hell no. But we can all agree right here that nobody wants that coach down in Pennsylvania diddling with young boys in the shower. And every one of us voted right here, right now. I doubt anybody's going to vote that guy has the right to do that. You see what I'm saying? So that would be a legitimate authority that we would put over ourselves. If somebody's going to tell you that you can't go chase beautiful jobs over in Europe because a political boundary stops you, even though a rich guy's capital can shoot over there, his billions of dollars, you can't travel there and get a job. So that is illegitimate authority, and there's no way we should vote for it. So that's just some examples. But it's called meaningful democracy, and you have to get in below and inject that in there and then push from the bottom up. It's the only thing we can do.
So isn't a more effective way of going about that starting in the system we're already in and then trying to change it as you work your way in?
Yes, and that's always an alternative. There's nobody who's 100% expert on any of these issues. The thing is that it is so systemically corrupted. There is not a line item in any bill, there's not an institution, there's nothing that isn't either running scared like public radio and the Department of Education and the Environmental Protection Agency. They're in a fight for their lives right now. And so those are,
I got a way of addressing
sure.
some of that
Go
too.
ahead, Tyler.
We have one thing that we can do is engage on every level that we can and not be limited to only the electoral cycles. One part of a democracy starts with, and one of the reasons that it's enshrined in our Constitution is the right to free speech, the right to assembly, and the right to a free press. And without a free press, you cannot have a democracy, because without an educated populace, you cannot have a democracy, right? They have to even understand what the issues are that they're voting for, right? So a lot of what we do is the media in many ways has been stolen from us by corporations that are pushing their agenda that look at the news as actual fill just to be able to put the ads in. They're looking at the ads as more important than the news itself. So the way that issues are presented to us and the choices that we're given a lot of times are false choices given to us by corporations that then we're supposed to translate their will into voting. So addressing what you're talking about as far as engaging our system, if we get together as citizens and really have a conversation and educate each other, then we're much more likely to go forward and make better decisions, which have the concerns of the community that you live in involved in the thought process of making those decisions besides just a corporate false model. So regardless of how you engage yourself politically or apolitically, the first step in that would be being organized and being educated. So our process, even though there's a lot of different opinions of how things should be done, don't exclude the political process from being part of the tools that we have. But by gathering and then realizing that there's power in numbers and realizing that our agenda is greater than the agenda of the 1%, then when we do move forward into politics, we're able to have a stable footing and we have the power to back up what we're saying, and also being able to put power on politicians to make sure that they honor our will. So it adds power to the democratic process, not takes away nor being exclusive of using. Myself, I'm an anarchist, okay? But I am in a system that I also must use to the maximum benefit that I can.
You got another question there, brother.
I'll be honest with you guys. I don't have the greatest attention span, so like with a long story short, for each one of you guys as an individual, not as a team, I'd just like to know what was like the spark for you that set this off to make you want to start this, and then we'll go.
Yeah, just real quickly. I mean, it's. I was probably, and I call it a radicalization, which is, like I said, it's just realizing that something is really up. I was probably, oh man, it was much more like 5th or 6th grade in elementary school when I realized, and it's just the way I'm born. I can look at the TV, I can listen to my instructors and stuff, and I'm just realizing that 9/10 of this is just bullshit. And somebody's trying to pull something over on me. So I was atomized. It's called, I was totally isolated. When I when I tried to ask somebody what the hell's up, I got my ass beat for just standing out. And the nail that sticks up gets hammered down is an old Japanese proverb. So, and then I actually, in 1975 at CVU, I heard Bernie Sanders debate Peter McTagg, who was the CEO of Green Mountain Power at the time, and just a fire-breathing right-winger that just, I mean, I won't even get into his personal views, but Sanders was a very aggressive young guy, had never had any political office. He had moved to Vermont, and he was full of idealism, and he's carried it to this day like a damn champion. But I heard those two debate, and I was like, holy shit, there is somebody else out there like me. And then I looked into alternative media immediately. I discovered Noam Chomsky. I discovered Howard Zinn. I discovered some of these guys and women, tremendous amount of female energy and authors and thinkers, and I just started the Nation, the Progressive, In These Times, Utne Reader, all the books by these guys. I mean, they're out there. Every library is packed full of it. You can go to corporate Borders or whatever it is and get all that alternative media. But so for me, that was it. Just being skeptical. I was born very skeptical. I don't like being lied to at all.
And for you?
For me, I'm actually not that far removed from where you guys are. I graduated from Burlington High School in '07, and I felt pressure from my family, from guidance counselors, from teachers to go to college, and I went to a very expensive college, private institution in New York City, and I racked up about 4 years later $80,000 worth of debt. And so, I took 3 steps backwards before I even left the gates, and that for me was the realization that what we're doing is selling our citizens this idealistic lifestyle that in reality doesn't exist, and we're through the media and through politicians addicted to the notion that we can achieve that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've kind of with Brad, I started reading books early, young, and I've now developed a political identity as an anarchist too. So when it first came out that these folks in New York City were organizing on consensus principles and consensus democracy, that is super exciting for me, just from an anarchist philosophy of getting everyone's voice to be heard, and really avoiding the domination of people by a majority. A simple majority still leaves. If you have 100 people, 51 people say they want something, 49 people say they don't want something, that can be pretty oppressive in a lot of ways, because that's still 49 people, a significant number of people who are not agreeing with what decision is happening. So the consensus process that's being used was super exciting to me. And just some experiences I've had where I grew up in North Carolina, there's a lot of police repression of the Latino community there. There's a lot of blatant racism. I grew up in a school where a lot of people that I was friends with had parents who couldn't read, just because of poverty and structural racism in our society. So I guess I've been around it and kind of developing an analysis of it as I've gotten older, and I've now come to UVM, and occupations are a tactic, I think, that are pretty powerful. I was arrested in an occupation of President Vogel's office 3 years ago, and that was like a catalyst for me to just like, wow, like we pay for this space and we like pay to be part of a system in terms of a university, and there's a lot of things that happen in these systems that we're involved in, and use it, like our money is going to these systems, and like we have this much say in it in reality. And so that was like kind of a wake-up call for me, like that like we're paying to be here, we're asking for these things to happen, we're asking for some say and some transparency in what goes on here, and really the people who have a vested interest in the status quo are so opposed to giving voice to the people below them and the people who really want change there. And I think that that's really entrenched in our society, and just like seeing the reaction from the people in power now, like the police and the state and the city governments, just like they're afraid. They're shutting down occupations all over the country. Like that's a clear indication to me that we're giving like a manifestation of these issues and these concerns that we have in a way that is causing these people in power to really check themselves and be like, wow, these people actually are mobilizing a lot of power here. Like their issues are things that other people are getting on board with quickly. It's all over the world. And I mean, this is a moment, like the civil rights 1960s, like that was a defining moment of a generation. I think right now that's what's going on here too. So that's really like, for me, what's been behind my involvement here. Yeah.
Politics is a struggle for power. Don't ever forget that. It's not the fake little thing you see on TV. Politics, when you boil it all down, it's a struggle for power. And who do you want to give power to? Yourself. So don't let people tell you what to do. You need to struggle for your power. And it ain't easy. That's why we just all sit there complacently, because it's not easy. But don't be afraid to fight back.
Well, I guess the way I could best put my involvement is, now I've traveled a lot. I've been done disaster response. I spent 7 months in Haiti last year after the earthquake, and went to Kashmir after the earthquake. Mobilized nurses here in Vermont to set up clinics, and spent a lot of time after post-Katrina. And when you do, and also have done human rights work, done helping whistleblowers in New York City, and a number of things. But to me, it would boil down to the way I guess I could best explain it is, I was in a refugee camp in Jenin, in what's called the West Bank of Palestine, and I was sitting with a mother who had a doctorate in something. She was incredibly well educated, and we were sitting on a foundation of a house that had been blown apart by American missiles multiple times. So every time they'd rebuild the house, they would airstrike it and level it again. So the folks that owned it decided to just wait and not try to rebuild, and for exercise in futility. So we sat on the foundation in these chairs, and Arab hospitality is very gracious. So her son was running to get me tea and whatever I wanted to make sure I was comfortable as we sat. And this woman asked me, she said, well, why are you here? And I said, well, I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn of what you go through, and bear witness. And I said, well, I'm also here to help. And she said, well, that's really nice, and of course you're welcome here anytime, and you could live with us and you could stay here. She said, but if what you say is true and you really want to help, then go back to your country and fight for justice. Fight for justice in your country. Fight for your issues in your country. That's how you can best help. So then that kind of reminded me of my responsibility, and like the bumper sticker says, peace starts at home. So a lot of ways, the best ways that we can be effective in the world is with the contacts in our own communities, with the people we already know, and open up these conversations and try to do organizing in our own communities, and try to take responsibility for our actions inside our own nation, with our actions, with our votes, with how we spend our money and everything else. So to me, I'm here and joining this movement because of a responsibility to do so, and also, as she was saying a little earlier, about how, as an anarchist, we like to see mutual participation. And here's a place where anyone from any political
any religious, any kind of background is welcome to join a circle and open a conversation in which there's equality. And that to me is going to attract me to it like a bug to the light every single time. That's why I'm here.
You go, Tyler.
Anybody else have any questions? Anything you'd like to say, disagree with?
What about questions from people who disagree? I mean, I read all your papers, and I know that there are a lot of people out here who think that
But
this
that's
is
cool,
all
too.
just a
It's, you
waste
know.
of time. So this is your chance. I mean, express your opinions.
Remember, Thomas Jefferson said there's nothing better for a healthy democracy than a revolution every 20 years. And that's one of our greatest founding father thinkers. So we're just, we're just on that same trend, that same wavelength.
And I agree with Ben. I think when you said that this Occupy, which I had questions about having gone to Wall Street last weekend and reading what I read and having a husband who watches Fox News every night, don't tell Phil I told you.
I know, I love Phil.
That there are a lot of questions in my mind, but what I know right now, that this might be your room full of your biggest critics.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and that is what's key about what's happening right
Yeah.
now. In 34 years, I have not seen speakers come to this school who are taking the risk these guys and gals are in regards to their language and what they're presenting and issues. And if you leave this high school and you don't have the capability with your intellects, and I look at all of you in this room, and I know each of you have them, as different as they are, and you can't question these people, and you can't figure out what you're gonna do within the system you're in, because that's what I battle with every day. I'm in the system, and I battle every day to make sure something different might happen for a student, okay? I don't preach conformity, which people think I do, but I disagree with some of the things these people are saying, but I'm not gonna say anything right now because the learning process here is not to agree with them, but it's to have a dialogue with them, because they're real, they're from the street,
how
they're
we say
out there,
yes.
they're out there, okay? And I don't think you guys are gonna go to Burlington, I mean, today's the day, right? It's like
All
all over,
afternoon,
it's
we're-
this,
there's
right?
a huge
Today's the day.
mobilization this
But I don't
afternoon.
think,
We're
asked-
marching.
I would go to the principal and say, I want this class released so they can go and see what's going on and sit and have a dialogue in real life there in the park.
We're marching, let's rock it.
But they wouldn't let you do that, so we brought it to you here. So this is like the way Shane just wanted to ask them about them and what sparked
Very cool,
it.
man.
Cause I don't think I think he's a critic about most of what was said.
I want to just critic.
Yeah. Or
One of the things that makes us strong as a movement is any voice, regardless of your point of view, you
Yeah.
don't need to come to us agreeing with us. We would be strengthened by and give equal time to
Yeah.
anything that you said and honestly think about it. And actually, as equal to any one of us speaking, you are one of us, and your concerns are just as valid as any of ours, and our arguments and our positions could be strengthened by listening to your critique and seeing how we could apply that to what we do, regardless of our philosophical bent.
Yes.
Criticism and inclusiveness of people who do criticize us makes us stronger because we're able to address them and come to consensus with them.
It's the
And in many
diversity.
cases, that means that we check ourselves. Many times it's somebody else sees where they could fit in. But that's where it is it's open for dialogue. It's an open circle. So you could come in, be a Tea Party, go George Bush, and we could all
We'll
learn from
embrace
that
you.
exchange.
We embrace it.
and
we
that's what
embrace
this-
thought.
There's a
that's what
question
this
over there. Sorry, I want to encourage discussion because we have 5 minutes right now.
Questions, 'cause I know some people are feeling a little weird about this.
Go for it.
Well, last week we had a debate and there was a pro side and a con side. And I support Occupy Wall Street 100%. But I know there's been negative connotations in the media, like with all the sex and drugs and alcohol in the middle of the streets, and how it's disrupting different businesses. Like, how does that make you feel? What are your thoughts on that? How is it actually?
I could address
Going
some
on
of that
down
real
there.
quick.
Does that happen?
Is that being portrayed correctly?
There's a balance. For one, in the way that some of the encampments are run, they're completely open, anybody can join. And in a few cases, in our case, we had some homeless or individuals, houseless individuals join us that had alcohol consumption problems. And that was a legitimate concern, and the first ones to address that was us, and the ones that were most worried about that was us. But it's also that we're kind of representative of society at large, and there's a certain segment of them that do, but that's a very legitimate concern. Maybe overblown in some cases, maybe not in other ones, but an honest one.
Let me say one quick thing too. The way that corporate media works in a structural sense is to demonize and dehumanize, and belittle and make you feel, make you feel, or to make the reader feel like we're a bunch of lunatic wackos. That's exactly, I mean, what else are they going to do? They're not going to admit that their system is corrupted and that they're a bunch of sellouts, ever. So what they're going to do is like focus, they shock and titillation are some of the terms that in the industry they use. Sound bites, shock and titillation, then everybody can move on and go shopping. Okay, so that's the way they work. So we wouldn't expect anything else. Structurally, if they did anything else, I would be shocked. Because it's a mechanism. They're performing their role for the people that own the society.
It is a legitimate concern, though, I think, because, and it really, for me, it does illustrate some of the issues that we as a society have not adequately addressed really at all, especially in Burlington. And I know that VPR did a piece recently on, and it talked to people from COTS and people from the Howard Center, and just like talked about the issues of alcohol consumption, substance abuse, and mental health issues in Vermont specifically. And like Waterbury has closed, so our mental health services are strained right now in general. So this is just specifically from a Vermont perspective, but the suicide rate in Vermont is rising for a bunch of different reasons. And these issues are real, and I think that they do illustrate that on a broader societal level, like these things happen and they go on in our communities. And the Occupy movement is putting, like, because of how the media operates and because it's looking for issues to draw attention to in our movement, it's also really spotlighting some of the things that our society as a whole has not adequately addressed. And I would say it's because of the fracturing of our communities, and the social fabric of our communities has like been disintegrating for the past 50 years, in part because of consumerism. And so we have a lot less social responsibility towards each other and those community ties to really address those problems together. And I think that the beginnings of that was happening in our camp together. And we definitely hadn't solved all the problems, and they were still real concrete issues that we were trying to address. And a lot of us aren't professionals and can't, like, I don't exactly know how to deal with those issues myself. But it was a huge learning process, and really the connections that we have, like, my friend Free he was a member of that houseless community, and he's like really trying hard right now to stop drinking because of the social ties that he's made and the friends that he's made in the encampment and what he values. So there's been some successes, and there's been some backpedaling too, but it's definitely a real issue.
Isn't part of this movement to recirculate money from the top 1% back into the middle and lower classes?
It is. You're darn right it is. May I address that?
Yeah, please do.
Let me just give you a concrete example of how this works in society. Let's take the Social Security system. There's a law saying that if you make, I'm not sure exactly what the limit is, but it's about $110,000, $120,000, give or take a few. And the way it works is, let's call it 120. If you make $120,001, you don't pay Social Security tax on that additional dollar, the additional $2, the additional $25 million. So if you're making $25 million a year, you pay an infinitesimal, meaning a very small percentage of your income as Social Security tax. If you're you or I, middle class citizens, going to work making $10 an hour, you pay 6.9%, and your employer matches 6.9%. So let's bear in mind who is actually bearing the incidence of the employer's portion. If you have a company and they have $50,000 to spend for 1 year to hire you, are they going to pay $50,000 plus the 6% tax? So are they going to pay $53,000 to hire you? No, they're going to pay you $47,000, and they're going to put the tax on top of what they don't pay you to make it $50,000. So the employee is really paying almost 14% in Social Security tax, while the richest people in the country are paying damn near zero. So as far as redistributing wealth, part of this movement is to find some common ground between those two parts.
Remember, just one quick comment on that. We'll get right to you, man. But remember, you vote. The only democracy you guys, you participate as well as I do. You vote every single day. The electoral system is highly subject to interpretations. But when you spend your money, you're voting with that dollar for how you want the world to look. Because those companies dominate and control the whole world. So if you're buying at farmers markets, et cetera, it's way different than some corporate produce that got shipped in from Chile, and they shipped it with diesel fuel, and on and on and on. So you're voting every day the way you want the world to work. If you spend your money in your community, you're helping, it's called cycling your dollars within inside the community. If you spend at a big chain store, the money goes zoop over to Little Rock, Arkansas, or zoop over to Switzerland, or wherever it's going. If you keep your money circulating in your community, it builds everybody up. So that's a very logical way to redistribute wealth. You can't tell rich people what to do. They're going to kill you. When you bash capitalism, they will bomb you. Look what happened in Iraq. I mean, these people are not touchy-feely. They will kill you. So, but what you can do is vote with your money.
Well, a quick two other quick examples though of redistributing wealth locally. For one is if you buy local, you keep in your money in your own community. Another thing that you can do is also put your money from one of these too big to fail banks in a credit union. And the credit unions have a whole different democratic way of operating with their money. But part of the movement is what we can do as individuals to make sure our wealth goes to the right places. So it's as much a responsibility for us of what we demand as well as outside of us.
We get one more question in there, sure.
Do you feel the way you like go about things, like marching through like the streets, like we saw a video, like do you feel like there could be other less disruptive ways to get your point across to people?
We're using every possible tool available to us as free American citizens. That is just it's called direct action, and that's the working group that I'm in. And I'm extremely proud of that marching. Does it affect everybody all the time? No. Does it help build us up as a team and help us feel our inner power? Hell yes, it does. And maybe with public speak-outs and stuff, if we touch 2 people, if one of you people get radicalized here today, we're a success. Even if nobody does, and you think about it for 10 more years, if you start to be a little more open-minded and be a little skeptical, then we've won.
But what if someone's like, their kid's in the hospital and they're trying to go and you guys are just blocking them off, like, and they just can't get there, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying that's like
No, I completely
realistic. I'm just saying,
understand
do you feel like there's other ways you could get your point across that would be less disruptive to society?
It's been going on for 1,000 years, man, and everything's been tried, and this is what we've evolved to.
We're trying to be as disruptive as possible. At least me, personally speaking. The more we could shut down every single thing from even moving at all, except for maybe emergency vehicles if somebody headed to the hospital, which
Right.
everybody would get out of the way immediately, then fantastic.
No.
Like today is a day of action where Wall Street's getting shut down, the subway systems are getting shut down,
Now,
things
that
are getting
will
shut down
change
because
too,
there's
man.
no
That
more
will
business as
change,
usual.
Because we don't want to cause world chaos and not solve problems, but we're using the tools that are allowed to us under the U.S. Constitution.
Alright, thanks, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, like aren't the protests are also costing us quite a bit of money and like extra police time and everything else
Yeah,
that's
but-
coming out of the taxes at the
Yeah,
In a
99%?
proportionately, go ahead,
Okay,
sure.
Cool. So it is costing us a lot of money, but we're not demanding that money be spent on us. We want to, right, like the occupations and the protests, like with the First Amendment guarantees our right to mobilize and our right to have protests, and occupations are being held in public space. Like, it's space that's designed for the public to use it. We're part of the public and we're wanting to use it. So, you're right, the police are being paid overtime to deal with us, but in my ideal situation, I can't speak for any of these people or anyone else, but like in my ideal situation, I don't want to have to engage with the police. Like if they're gonna come with their riot gear and their tear gas, I will. But I didn't ask them to come there. I don't personally feel that the occupations are disrupting society enough to warrant a police response of that magnitude. And I'm pretty sure in the conversations that I've had with the police on UVM campus at least, they seem pretty down for this. They're like, you know what? It's my bosses. I have to come here and do this. Like, we have to ask you to leave. We have to ask you to like just take the tent down, be really quiet about it. Like, I support what you're doing. I don't have to do this. And so like there's this tension between bosses again and workers also, and then also just like how we use public space and what public space was designed for and the limitations that people are putting on public space just in general.
Remember too that like if you pay $1 in taxes, about 4% of it right now goes to cover the entire welfare system of the United States. It's only 4 cents out of every dollar that we pay as taxes. Corporate welfare is about 45 cents. This direct subsidy of the super rich and their corporations is about 45 cents out of that dollar. I don't hear anybody screaming about corporate subsidies in this electoral cycle, ever. So remember that it's.
So I'm just gonna
Hey,
say,
Ben.
anybody who wants to go, go. If people want to stay and keep asking questions, they can stay. We don't
Where are we
understand.
going?
It's called,
Block
Yeah, I have to
4.
go.
If you gotta go to block
Yeah.
4, go to block 4. If you want to stay and ask questions, I'm sure they're happy to stay.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
guys.
guys for having us. It's awesome.
I just have one more question for you. So you've gone to different countries and worked with people. How did
See you
go
guys.
about
Thank
doing
you.
it?
Thank you guys. Have a great day.
For me, it was real simple. I bought an airplane ticket and I went.
Really?
I've never been affiliated with other organizations, although I'm allies with other organizations. But I've just gone as an individual. For example, like going to Gaza. Then I actually did work with an organization. It was we were invited by the UN for International Women's Day, and I was one of the only men that was on a big bus load full of women, mostly Jewish women, that were going in on a public trip, a tour of Gaza. And then what I did though is I hid from the bus when it left to make sure that I was left in Gaza, and then just spent my own time there just getting to know people and documenting, and all my stuff's online, YouTube channel, Why Not News. But like Haiti, when the earthquake happened in Haiti, I was sitting in my house, traumatized, watching the television. A friend of mine came to my house and said, "Why aren't you in Haiti?" I was like, "Well, give me an airplane ticket." A couple days later, I was in Haiti. And then, but I went as a private citizen, identify a problem, some little problem I might be able to help, gain support on Facebook and online for donations and more volunteers, and then deal with the situation. But it's never been, I've never been like sent by another organization. Like in Hurricane Katrina, I opened the clinic for first responders, for the firefighters, and for the police of East Biloxi, and set up the largest relief center there. But as an anarchist with no affiliation and official permission or waiting for somebody to tell me what to do, just taking initiative to do things. And for example, going into Gaza, the Egyptian government, if I couldn't get in on the bus, it's questionable getting in Gaza. They told one way that you could get into Gaza is as press. So I am press. I filmed for years. I'm a citizen journalist. But some people like to see proof somehow that you're a citizen journalist. So that's not hard to do. I looked online at what a press pass looks like. Got a really nice photo where I was trying not to laugh too hard. Made it look like a press pass. It said official press pass right on it so I could prove it's real. And then use that and fooled every Arab government that I dealt with after with my press pass just by walking in things like I own it. Of course I have my press pass. But taking initiative to do stuff like that. Also, I went down south to help out in Katrina. There's good old boys, like short hair, and they don't want no liberals around or nothing, right? Say, hey, no problem, man. I cut my hair. I got it just duded up like they did, and I got a shiny metal clipboard. And I had a necklace that said I worked for the government that I found. But it was supposed to have ID on it, but I didn't have the ID because I'm not an ID kind of guy. So I just put it in my pocket as if I had the ID. So now I have the clipboard. It says I work for the government on my necklace. And then I never told anybody I did. They made the assumption that I worked for the government. And I was able to work completely within their system with military, firefighters, police. I was in a direct line of communication with the heads of the relief. And I never had any qualifications, nor did anybody send me. I just kind of bullshitted my way in there, and I just played the part and was way more effective than a lot of other organizations that didn't know how to shoot from the hip. Because Katrina was a mess, and you kind of have to look around and make things happen, not wait for somebody to give you a list of things to happen. I was the guy making a list for other organizations of things that they could do to help out. So a lot of these have just been individual, get in there and do it.
Oh yeah, mine goes back to like the working class having all the power. Like, I feel like there's people that will always be willing to work for less. So like, how do you get so that
You mean the disparity around the world where other countries have a vastly different standard of living than we do and stuff?
Well, I just mean like, how do you get so that everyone like, yeah, like.
Well, there's, I kind of understand where you're coming from. Like in the U.S., you're talking primarily in the U.S. There's always people that are willing to work for less.
Like work for less, yeah.
Well, as you get down, like just through the economic strata, you know, you have all the extremely poor, like the disenfranchised, complete underclasses that are usually either in the black market or they don't work at all. And then you go up, you know, through working poor and poor people in middle, you know, lower upper and middle class. The farther you get down that food chain, the more people are pitted against each other. And it's true because they are so brutally marginalized. that they are willing to work for less to some degree. Is that their choice? That's something that the system is forcing on them. If you empower them to be with an education and whatnot, they're going to actually start to demand a fairer shake in the economic pie. So one reason why poor people are not educated, especially if you go to Guatemala or if you go to some of these third world countries around us, they don't even give the indigenous population an education. And I read, it was very interesting, it was in one of our foreign aid institutions, I was just reading a bunch of documents, and this quote from a foreign aid agency for international development executive said he was mad and he shot a memo off that said, why should we educate these GD people? We're going to have to get them a job. And I thought to myself, that's insane. I mean, so they have such a dogmatic idea that the super rich, I mean, they literally believe in like social Darwinism, where these rich people are blessed by God to have all the power, and then all of us just have to fight over scraps. So their dogma is very bizarre. But if you give people an education, they demand some land, they want health care, they want a job, and they want a fair shake at society. So that will change with some democracy.
One thing too I would add to that is that that's a tactic used by the system to propagate this notion among people. The notion that it's known in Marxism as the lumpen proletariat. The notion that that there's always a reserve army. The unemployed is the reserve army of capitalism waiting to come rushing in if we decide to stand up and insurrect.
Yeah, so how do you get everyone to like stand up and not like...
That's a valid question. I think in capitalism, it's going to come in time. It sows the seeds of its own destruction, and one of the ways we've seen that in society today is through credit. Since the 1970s, real wages, meaning inflation-adjusted wages, have stayed flat. And so the method by which Americans have been able to build their standard of living is by taking out credit cards, by taking out home equity loans, other kinds of loans, to fuel their standard of living as they're driving themselves further into debt. Eventually, there becomes a point where you can't pay that debt. It self-fuels. Because you have to pay it back at interest, all the money that exists and is circulated in the world is always less than all the money that is owed back. So as some of these debt systems reach their breaking point, people are going to have no choice but to stand up. And so it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will.
And throughout history, people have organized together. I think, like, right now we're seeing people come together and organize and say, like, what exists now is a race to the bottom, people constantly trying to undercut each other and work for less and work for less and work for less, and eventually we're just all going to get to a point where we're, like, trying to work for way less than each other, and we're getting to a place where we can't even afford to earn, like, we're earning things that don't substantiate our lifestyles at all. I don't know. And so, like, in the 1920s and 1930s, there was a huge effort in this country, like the early 1900s, to organize the working class and the workforce. And I think we see waves of that in terms of American history in general, just like, I don't know, there were just huge labor movements in that period. And I think labor movements, unions are one way of addressing the race to the bottom. I think right now with the Occupy movement, it's like another way of really looking at things and seeing how we all like have intersecting identities and common ground and like that, like whereas we approach things from an individual level, whereas individuals would be constantly undercutting each other, like sitting down together, realizing our common ground and finding how we can stand up and confront the system that's causing us to outcompete each other. That's what's happening now, and I think that has really awesome implications for.
Remember, this was a third world country. In the end of the 1800s, it was two tiers. There was the owners, and then there was all of us. And what created the American middle class? People in the streets demanding an 8-hour day, getting the unsafe working conditions out of all these factories. It was us in the streets. My grandfather was an organizer in Shell Oil and refining gasoline in Illinois as a German guy during World War I and World War II. He's lucky. I mean, a lot of those people got executed by mob. Pinkerton hired thugs, hired by the companies, trying to keep these workers down. But they put out so much energy that we all benefit. Still to this day, there was no middle class in this country, and there never would have been without organized labor. The bosses hate it. So there's never been a pro-union legal decision since 1935 when the right to organize was passed. Every single, and there's thousands of judicial system decisions about organized labor. Since that initial act, there has never been another pro-union legal decision, and that is not an accident. That's because the people that own the society don't like you to organize. So that means organize.
Something I want you four to know is that this school and the students in it take the initiative, and that's a key word that you just used for yourself. They've done response to Haiti, they've done response to Katrina, and this is why I stay working here, because if you take anything back to the streets from us, because we've gotten a lot from you, is take back that these students will get very interested in doing something to respond to what's going on, and that's...
We love public education.
I'd like to get more than more.
We love public education.
And that's another key word
Absolutely.
for you
We
all.
love you guys. I mean, it's so important to support. Teachers are always under attack in this country too. You never, the media and the rich people never stop attacking because they want to privatize this system and extract profit from you in that way also. So because you cannot support your libraries too much, you can't support your teachers too much, you can't support your post office too much. Remember, all of these public institutions cost the federal government money, so they're always under attack from these elites. They want the whole thing to be just this giant corporatocracy where everything is privatized. Even the highways are next, people. Social Security's in jeopardy. Medicaid, Medicare, they're in jeopardy, real jeopardy, because the country is supposedly broke. And there's candidates running for, Republicans running for office right now that want, in their platform, they want to get rid of the EPA, they want to get rid of the Department of Education, they want to get rid of the Housing and Urban Development. I mean, everything that doesn't subsidize business, they want it gone, except for the Pentagon, and they want more wars, massive wars.
And realize what's going to happen here is I took Brad's name to Ben and Cookie as far as bringing the real world to you, knowing you had been studying this. I didn't give a script to administration. I didn't give it to Cookie. This is all wide open here. The person who's going to get in trouble for any of this is me. At the same time, the fact that it made any of you stop and think and ask a question, you just made my day and my year. Okay?
Thank you so much.
We have a question
I
right
just
here.
have a quick question. Why do you, like, I know that Occupy Wall Street has spread to other countries. Why do you feel that it's done that? Do you think it's going to impact us directly, or does their government?
Globalization. Go ahead, dude.
Yeah. The reason it has spread to other countries is, like I was saying earlier, there's the 1% that controls the land and the capital. There's the 99% that sells their labor to the ruling class. And so people in China, in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, Tunisia, America, all over the world are realizing working classes in those countries have more in common with each other than we do with the ruling classes of our own countries. And so that's a big reason why it's spread across the world.
Like racism is a smokescreen for classism. Don't ever buy into those isms.
No.
The classism, meaning that upper classes do not, they reject you as human beings. So all the black and white and brown and all this stuff is a smokescreen, so you don't realize that classism is the real power dynamic, okay? All that other stuff is fake. If you hate and mistrust people around you for accidental qualities like skin color or he's gay or something, you're being divided and conquered. We're all the same. 85% of Americans have a combined family income of less than $55,000. 85% of them, we're all the same. So,
You have a question here?
Yeah, like I agree with a lot of your opinions and beliefs, but like the whole protesting thing to me seems kind of just like a waste of time.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like any change is gonna happen, and like how are you guys gonna convince the 1% to like give up their money and power?
We're not trying to convince the 1%. We're trying to convince the 99% to stand up. And
But what can they do
protesting
if they do
starts
stand
this
up?
conversation. This is just one step. As we get more organized, we can have more effect.
there's nothing but mind, people's initial inertia and drive. The reason there's no labor section in the New York Times, there's no women's section in the New York Times, there's nothing in a corporate media that will teach you and her how to organize to better your lot in Vergennes. And the Burlington Free Press will never mention a way that you can individually organize. And that would be one of the most important, I mean, and I'm not saying anything against public education. These guys are under a lot of pressure, this corporate pressure. But in schools, in Essex Junction, what happened when that kid got beat up for being bisexual or whatever? 300 self-organizing, very determined young people stood up and said, that is bullshit. We're not doing it anymore. We're not drinking this Kool-Aid. And they stuck it right out there, and they self-actualized, and they protested that injustice. And it's the same kind of phenomenon that will happen. It's called a synergistic reaction, where once it, and a couple catalysts, which is what we're trying to be with our protesting, and like it or hate it, we ain't going away, because it's how we express ourselves. We're trying to get in people's comfort zones, man. We're trying to make them nervous, and it works. And it's been done throughout history. There were people, when you resisted the Roman Empire, you were guaranteed dead until the Goths and Visigoths and whatnot, because of a declining empire, they were able to overrun it. But you had zero rights as a lower class person. And what did they do? They still, certain people, 1% of those Romans, the oppressed slaves of Romans, they fought back. And it's always going to be that way. And once you get a catalyst, like the middle class, will move upwards, and we will just, there's so many now. We have 330 million people in this country. The top 400 rich white guys have as much wealth as 200 million of us on the bottom, okay? 200 million people walking out in the streets and just going, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not drinking this Kool-Aid, and I'm done with it. So they're going to go, oh my God, my company's going to collapse. I'll do anything you want. I'll do anything. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but how do you plan on fighting back? Like what?
Working into the political system that already exists for now. It's too time intensive to deconstruct the whole thing and rebuild it. We're a pure democracy. I talk a lot, and these are my opinions. But when we work together, I don't say any more than she does, or him, or the black folks and the gay folks and everybody who's with us and working people, and we have to, and I'm not allowed to. By our pure democratic movement, you'd have to come to a General Assembly and look. We didn't want to lay that on you today too heavily, but we have a specific process for keeping me from dominating the conversation and empowering her to get her voice out, okay? So we can inject our pure democracy back in, because that's what it's supposed to be. They make it seem like it should be like that, so we can go in there and demand it.
I want to answer that also. A lot of us, none of us have the answer as to how we're going to make it all better. But the very beginning, we're 2 months into this occupation movement, started 2 months ago. We're in our infancy. The biggest step that we can do now is, like I was saying, and a lot of us were saying before, is create the space to where we as a society can be able to have a discussion from many points of view of how do we move forward. Is that through this process, that process? You know what I mean? And a lot of us each one of us will have individual ideas, but collectively, we have to answer those very same questions. The very same critiques that a lot of people have of us regarding our problems, we would be the first ones to have those critiques of ourselves. We're very aware of that. So now we really are, like I say, we'd like to draw in. I'd like to see more Tea Party type people that are honest about it, not like people who are fiscal conservatives. I'm down with. Mm-hmm. But I would like to see our discussion join more of our critics to strengthen our position and be more inclusive of, as we say, we're the 99%. Well, those voices need to grow for that really to be true. And then we come later on in our own choices after being educated, make decisions to how we go next.
And I just want to jump in on this too. I'm sorry, I see your hand. But like the protests are a very public face of the movement and what's being publicized a lot. And I think that like there's a lot that comes behind the protest, and there's a lot of stuff that happens before and after the protest. And we have these huge public mass mobilizations, but like for me, when we had the camp in Burlington, some of the most beneficial organizing came out of conversations I had at like midnight with people who were up and awake at the camp, and we would just sit there and be like, what are we actually doing about this? So like the mobilizations are kind of like the party fun part of organizing, and like really to build solidarity amongst ourselves so that we can have fun and really be like invested in the movement, and also so that people can know that things are actually happening. But like, and I do agree with you that more needs to happen than just protesting.
Tell me about the working groups.
Oh yeah, so we have a General Assembly, and then in the General Assembly we have a bunch of people who want to do certain things. So like we have a comfort working group, and all of those people are coordinating food being brought to the camp, being cooked at the camp, the setup of the kitchen. We have the safety working group, which I think, I don't know, I know you and I have, and Brad,
We all have.
we've all
We
been on
all
the
have.
safety working group. So we'll stay up for 2 hours shifts at night and like really try to de-escalate. You're amazing at it. De-escalate situations between people who are like maybe feuding or conflict somehow.
We're drunk stumbling into the camp from the bars at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, we did it all, man.
Yeah.
I mean, every type of person, and most of it was
But
very
hang on, Brad,
positive.
she's got to get to the working
Yeah.
groups.
Yeah, so the working, so like, what do we have? An environmental working group that organized a huge rally around Vermont Yankee and is consistently working on Vermont Yankee issues and just energy issues in Vermont in general. We have a labor solidarity working group that's organized a lot of stuff among a bunch of unions. And today, the march that we're having today is only one public manifestation of what that labor working group is doing. There were teachers that were in Bennington that were on strike, and they were really helping out those teachers and getting a lot of solidarity for a bunch of folks in Burlington to help out the Bennington teachers. And so the labor working group does a lot of stuff. And so like the working groups are kind of a format. So we have these general assemblies where we have public decisions being made, and we have the direct action working group, which does schedule like huge public demonstrations. But aside from those huge public demonstrations, like I'm on the student working group, and we've been meeting consistently on how to get students more involved and more informed on these issues. Like I go to UVM, so like we have flyers we tabled yesterday. And just like making people more aware of all of these things, and then in addition, like creating for me a culture of resistance where these conversations are normal and we have this analysis that we can all share about how this stuff happens in our society, and just building a collective memory around like how to solve these problems, what potential solutions are, and just like because we're creative people. All of you are like amazingly creative people who probably have 10,000 different solutions to all the problems in your life, and it's just a matter of encouraging those conversations, and the working groups encourage those conversations about very concrete specific issues. So, and anyone is empowered to say, hey, you know what, I think this is an issue, I think I have a solution, like I'm going to start this working group, and anyone who else is interested and has some cool ideas on this can come over here and meet with me every single like Monday at 11 o'clock, and we can have our working group space over here to work on it.
So there's a lot more than just the visible protests. We're organizing,
Coming up with ideas.
yeah, and implementing.
But we do like that. It's a little civil disobedience, and all of us are just a little bit more, a little bit more activists than probably the average person. But all of us have families, and I guarantee you, I'm speaking for myself, but I have brought my whole family into the conversation decades ago. So sometimes, the actions of one can make a really big difference.
My children have joined me in the protests and in different working groups. My daughter's in comfort working group.
And my son is in direct action with me, so. Remember Sam Hartley? I know Mrs. Step does.
You had a question right here?
Yeah, you've defined yourself as an anarchist, and I feel like the media really villainizes anarchists, so I want to know what your definition of
I have kind of loose definitions. Mine doesn't involve property damage. There's a lot of people who think of anarchism as just tearing down. My version of anarchism would be building, and building a sense of community that's more reliant upon participation than some artificial power structure from on top. That doesn't mean I don't operate within that system, but it also means that I'm looking for a higher system. Like I consider the General Assembly of the gathering that we're in a moral authority to me, and I respect the decisions made in the process in that. Where I see the American government is they can enforce their rule with force, but they can't win over my heart. The GA's won over my heart. I see that as a moral thing, and then there's another thing that's by through force and coercion. So it's not to say I don't work within a system. It's not even to say that I wouldn't necessarily vote or not at some given point, but I'm looking for a higher guidance of morality than of legality.
So he doesn't recognize some of if they're not legitimate institutions, even though the federal government created them, if they determine that they're illegitimate, they don't attack them, but they don't recognize their legitimacy. You know what I'm saying?
Like, to me, if I obeyed the law, it was a coincidence, because I was going to have to obey it anyways, not because there was a law in place that forbid me from a particular activity.
And I got to get to work too.
I
so.
have a little Vergennes to take with you on your missions.
Very cool.
You'll just need
Thank
a
you
new
so
water
much.
bottle.
Hey, thank you very
And it's
much.
not
You
plastic.
are awesome.
Right. Yeah. It'll save some. Thank you. Thank you guys all for coming. Great question, man. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Like you guys protest in like Burlington and stuff, but don't you feel like it'd be more like
I mean, it's real.
it'd be better to like protest Capitol buildings, like in Montpelier, than like like a state park in Burlington.
Yeah, not going to apologize.
Yeah, I feel like that'd get you farther than like Burlington State Park.
We happen to be involved in that, but there's a lot of stuff going on in Montpelier, a lot of organizing going on there, and a lot of it is in public spaces. Thank you very much.
So I just feel like that would work better than like a state park in Burlington, because like there's not really like
it's going.
I would say
you're gonna see us pop up on the State House lawn.
Yeah,
it's inevitable.
I was looking for that because I was like, if you guys wanted so much change, wouldn't you want to go to a place where there is power in the state? Like
camp is just one tactic in one place.
Right.
We're gonna start jumping up all over the place. It's more of an idea, and the idea of a community and self-organizing community, rather than only the physical manifestation of a camp. That's just a signpost.
So like you're starting like small with like smaller places, get enough people, and then attack bigger places.
Yeah, and that may happen as well after we can get enough people going. But after we've learned as a community,
come on in, guys.
The problem we had last time.
Right.
One of those ways may be moving quick.
Everyone out.
Go to the Capitol building.
What's up?
We put up the camp there for 2 days, and before people who weren't dedicated, like
hey youngsters,
hey, welcome, come on in.
Even got there, would be gone
Come
again.
on in.
So we could avoid a lot of those problems.
Don't be nervous. We're leaving.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to hear what people have to say.
Thank you so much, Ben. Really awesome. And we're going to get you a copy.